So you cut through all this chain and you go right to the salesman who sells to the user. That's what I did.
Today, I have Ron McFarland, right?
Right. Scottish name.
Scottish name. Ron, thank you for being here this morning.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I
Yes,
appreciate it, Lance.
yes. Listen, I like to start off first by asking everyone, where were you born?
I was born in San Francisco, California.
Okay, you lived there all your life?
No, I lived there for at that time, a tune of 6 months, and then we moved into the Sierra Mountains. And I lived in Grass Valley, California from age 6 months to age about 4.
It's called Grass Valley?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
You know Nevada City?
Yes.
Okay, it's near Nevada City.
Okay.
It's going on Highway 80 up to Reno and here again the Sierra Mountains and Lake Tahoe.
Right.
Okay, I was in a small town in my very, very early age. Wow. So I lived there, and I still have memories of living in Grass Valley when I was 4 years old.
How many siblings do you have? Do you have siblings?
I have a sister. I
Older
have
or
one
younger?
sister. She's older than me.
How many years difference?
3 years difference.
Did mom and dad stay together?
No, and that's part of the story. At that point at 4, my parents divorced.
Okay.
And my father, here again, he was working for Bank of America at that time. My mother and father met during the World War II.
Right.
And my mother, interestingly, is Jewish.
Okay.
And she grew up in Miami, a Jewish community in Miami.
But your father isn't Jewish?
No, not at all.
But that makes you Jewish because she's Jewish.
Yes, I hear that quite often.
Right, that's
yeah,
right. Was she practicing? Did she ever practice?
No, not really. She wasn't practiced, but her siblings did, and her mother, my grandmother, did very, very much. But anyway, my mother and my father get married, which is a trauma to the Jewish community.
Because he's
Scottish guy.
He's Scottish, right?
He's Scottish from Missouri. I should say the name is Scottish. It goes into Russian and some other things, but the name is Scottish. And actually, on a business trip, I found my town, where my Scottish clan came from, where the McFarland clan came from, and that's another story. But anyway, my parents divorced when I was 4, and I never really lived in the same town as my father.
So you never knew him really?
As living, no. As living.
I see what
but
you're
we
saying.
were always in contact. He knew me, I knew him. He came by maybe once every month or 2.
Oh, so you did get to see
So
him.
I was in contact with him. We were never close. Interestingly, we both were, I don't know, his slant of business, and he's a banker. He worked for Bank of America for, I suppose, 50 years. I can't count the years. He was working for Bank of America when I was born, and then he died he retired from Bank of America, I think it was around 68, something like that. So you can imagine all those years. And he was in the Air Force Reserves too.
Air Force Reserves, okay.
So he was in the Air Force, and he met my mother in Miami, and he was here again during the war. And the war had ended. They got married. He had no reason to stay in Miami, and my mother, with the trauma within the family, the Jewish community, that's why when you ask the question, is she very, very religious? Judaism was painful for her. The trauma of following rules and such, for her community, was quite painful for her. So in a sense, you might say, not only did she move away, she escaped that community. And then they went to Missouri, and then after that went to San Francisco, and that's where my father started working for Bank of America. Okay. And he's very, very good with numbers. Mm-hmm. So in the Air Force, here again, he was in the Air Force. He was mainly in administration and supply and in asset control and such. And he did quite well. He retired as a full colonel. My father retired.
That's neat.
So he did well, and he did well in Bank of America.
How old was he when he passed?
I suppose 83 or something like that.
Is your mother still with us?
Huh?
Your mother, is she still with us?
No, she's passed away too.
Okay.
She passed at 86.
Okay.
So the only family really I have in America really, direct family is my my sister in Sacramento.
Okay.
And then she has 2 children and such, and I got a few cousins around. But honestly, Lance, the family is here. The Japanese
You made it here because you've been
family
here for
is
so
here.
long. Right.
My wife's Japanese, and she is the youngest of 4, and they're all Tokyo people, which is important because we can all get together.
We're in Tokyo. She was born in Tokyo?
Yes, mostly Bunkyoku.
Bunkyoku, okay.
Around Waseda University,
Okay.
that's where the kind of the homestead is.
Yes.
And the other children, they're pretty much in that area, in the Ikebukuro area, and that area. And I don't know if you know Takashima Daira,
Okay.
that area. Anyway, it's in the
Takashima Daira.
northern part. Now, I am living in the southern part. I'm in Ohta-ku.
Okay.
And I've been in Ohta-ku now for 20 years. Before that, I was in Kawasaki, just over the Tamagawa River. I was there for 17 years, and that's most of my life in Japan.
My goodness.
Most of my life has been.
So so growing up, tell me, as a little kid, were you more academic or were you more sports-minded?
I was more sports-minded.
Okay, what
So
kind of sports did you like in
Baseball
elementary
and football was my thing for. I was a terrible basketball player. I played tennis later on.
school? Okay.
And did a little bit of jogging and a little bit of golf. I played golf a little bit until I came here, and then I played something like maybe 5 to 10 rounds, and then I gave up.
So that's it.
It just, too expensive, too far, and too much time consuming.
Talk to me.
So I just quit.
Right.
And honestly speaking, I wanted to go out with my shorts on and
And
that
do it the
kind of
California
stuff.
style, yeah.
California style, and they're all
Oh,
dressing
Hawaiian
up.
style.
And
Right,
the
they're
company
ready.
tournaments are more strict, where you got department heads teeing off first, and then the younger-lings after that. And so that was not fun for me, so I stopped doing it.
What brought you to Japan?
Okay,
Your first experience.
here again. Let me just back up from
Okay, sure.
I'll try to run through this. I was in a junior college in Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I learned. I was interested in business, and I decided to go to a 4-year college, and I had to continue getting student deferments to stay out of the Vietnam War. Remember, and so I decided to go to San Jose State. So I went into Silicon Valley area, and I majored in business management. And more important is the management than the business. I wanted to work with and motivate people to achieve something. And I know that the business community produces, as you know very well, more goods and services than any other, organization or any other foundation, any grouping. The business community really carries the goods and services for the whole world. And then you've got partial philanthropy, and then governments there play a big role, but not like the business community.
So that's why I think your father's the one that got you into business because he was a banker. You thought.
It could be part of it, and I always admired him from a distance in a way. I've always kind of admired him.
Did he
but
ever marry again?
Pardon me?
Did he ever marry again and have another family?
Yes, he married again, and they had 1 child. It was married. It was one of those. The lady, the teller in the bank, he became interested in, and that's where my mother and my father separated, and she went off with this other lady,
Right.
and they had one child.
Did
So
your
I have
mother
one
ever marry
half-sister.
again?
Pardon me?
Did your mother ever marry again?
No, she never did.
She never did.
She
Okay.
was always single from then
Mm.
on. And wherever my mother was, that was home.
I hear.
And she worked for the government in Sacramento, and that's the capital of. So she worked for the government, and when she retired, she came and visited me. I had been in Japan already. She
Okay, but we're going to
visited
get
me.
we have to get to how you came here. What brought you?
Okay, right.
What brought
right.
you here?
Anyway,
And
so I
what
went
was
to
your
San
interest?
Jose, getting back to
Right.
San Jose. I went to San Jose, and I majored in business management. And in those days, Japan was Japanese management, and Japan #1, and Japan QC circles and quality control, and the Japanese were products. Well, you remember this in California. The Japanese products are coming in, and I started to get interested in international business. And so actually my father set up an appointment, so I went up from San Jose to the big Bank of America building in San Francisco, and he set up interviews for me. So we did not have a bad relationship.
good.
We
That's
just had a, how do I say it?
Distant.
A distant or thin relationship. I know basically him and his personality, and he's more of an accountant type than I am. And you probably guess I'm more of a sales, promotion, project development guy. I like sales, but I like sales development, not just selling something on the street. The development is more interesting, where I can figure out who needs what, who has what to offer, how can I bring the parties together. But Lance, I want to do that globally. I want to do that internationally.
That's what you were
where
thinking
do I
then.
go?
Right.
So that's where I was in San Jose. That's where I was in San Jose. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to get into international business. And my father's interviews failed them all. I didn't have a master's degree at that time. They don't want anything to do with me. And they said, you can work in a branch and work in the banker, and gradually later on, and I didn't feel comfortable with that. And I didn't feel comfortable with banking either. Just the promotion of money, or basically what you're doing, you're selling time, really. When you give someone a loan, you're giving him the time to have the money, to use it, and then you got to pay it back later. So you're just giving him time. And that is kind of a boring product for me. So anyway, in San Jose, there's a very, very small Japanese community, very small. And so I started studying Japanese. This is after I graduated. I had student loans, so as I mentioned, I graduated with a degree in business management, and my first management job was an assistant manager for a department store called F.W. Woolworths. I'm sure you remember F.W. It's long gone now, long bankrupt now, but anyway, I was hired into one of their branches as a branch manager, or it was a trainee, and then I became assistant manager. During that time, I'm really excited about watching products coming into our stockroom from all over Asia. And then, of course, I would put it on the shelf and we would promote it, and we would sell in my area. And that was right in the center of Silicon Valley. It's Los Gatos. I don't know if you know Los Gatos.
I know Los Gatos, yes.
From Los Gatos, it's, for example, from San Jose to Santa Cruz, right in between. But anyway, I was there for a year and a half, and that's where I thought, gee, people thought I was crazy being more interested in the stock room than out meeting the customers. And I like working with the public too. So I was out meeting the customers, and I found it a heck of a playground. I enjoyed working with the public. I really enjoyed working with the public. And that was the first time I realized too, I'm good at management. Particularly, it's strange, this is gonna come out funny, particularly managing women. Why women? And I thought about that is because I've always grown up with women.
That's right, your sister.
And I have one sister and my mother, of course, and the three of us grew up together. And I came to Japan. I get married, obviously, to a woman. What do we have? We have 2 daughters, and I have 2 granddaughters. So I am, let's say, incapable of producing boys. And I've always lived with women. And I tell people I'm not promiscuous or anything like that, but I've always kind of turned into a big brother. And in a business environment, you're helping people achieve things. And I tend to do that. So I noticed I was interested I was good at management and such, but I wanted to do this globally. And so where do I go? And in those days, you look at the numbers, huge trade numbers between Japan and the United States, particularly our area, California. Huge amount of influence. And so I talk about, well, I want to study international business. So they're offering French, and they're offering German, and they're offering Spanish, and that all the Western languages. And I thought that's not really me, because the business really is in Asia. And you look at the numbers, you look at the future, it's going to be more and more Asia. So the Asian suppliers are going to be impacting the United States more and more as time goes on. So that's where I wanted to be. And I was thinking between Chinese and Japanese at that time. I studied Chinese and Japanese, and I thought China, and of course China was an extremely communist strict, it was a closed country, so they were kind of out of the picture. That's not true today, of course, as you know. But in those days, China was really out of the picture. But I remember at that point, I started studying Japanese. And I studied about 3 years before coming here. I studied for 3 years before coming here. And then, while I'm studying it, I learned of an English teaching job in Japan that I could come here. And that is my gateway to Japan. Okay. That led me to Japan.
What was the program? Was that the JET program, or was just
no,
someone? How did you find out about this?
Actually, it was interesting. It was through my mother. A friend of hers just came back to Japan, and he said, I taught English for a year, and I have to find my replacement. So he introduced me to his little school, and it was not some huge national thing like a JET program or anything. It was a simple English
Where was it located?
In Utsunomiya, in Tochigi prefecture, north of here. So I went, my first job in Japan was in Tochigi prefecture. And here again, Lance, what I wanted to do is I wanted to get into the Japanese business community, either from the American side or the Japanese side. The American side, I needed degrees and I needed a lot of things to get in a large corporation. The smaller companies in the United States really had nothing to do with the foreign community or foreign business or anything like that.
I think at the time, what year was that you came here?
76? I came here in 1976.
1976. So
that was the bicentennial year of Biden.
Of course it was, yes, because I was at the American, let me see, 77, I started at the American school 77 to 80. But that's when bankers were here. The banks were really setting their foundation at that time when you came. So the big banks were here because I knew the president of Bank of America and those guys because they had kids at the American school. So that was what was happening at that time. Then after that, then you started having some medical companies were getting in. GE came in, a couple of the medical companies were trying to come in.
Pfizer was here.
Pfizer was here. Well, yeah, pharmaceuticals had gotten here. They'd been here for a while. But anyway, so you came here then. Did you go back? How long did you stay here? You stayed from that time until now?
Mm-hmm.
You've never gone back? You've never...
To live? No.
To live. When's the longest you've ever been away from Japan since you've been here?
2 months.
Wow, you got me beat. So after you had the job at teaching English and you wanted to get into business, what was your first job outside of that?
Okay, I worked, here again, I worked in Utsunomiya for 1 year.
Teaching English, right?
And then I came into Tokyo, and actually I hardly knew Tokyo, but I came in, I learned of a graduate school program here, and that was Sophia University. So I studied international business at Sophia University.
They had that small campus for foreigners?
Yeah, a small campus at Ichigaya.
Ichigaya,
it's not the main campus.
That's right.
It's somewhat moved from that. But so anyway, and what I did is when I left that little teaching job in Utsunomiya, I had people that liked me, so they would continue to want to learn from me, so I continued teaching them. So I got a little tiny apartment in Akabane, Kita-ku, Kita ward.
Okay.
But anyway, so I got a little apartment, no bath, just a room and such. So I was going to the sentoh, the public bath, every and that was something, that was an experience that has brought me today. You know, I've been on TV a bunch of times.
You've been all over the
sentoh.
Yes.
Sentohs around the country.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, or not sentoh, onsen, sorry.
Onsen,
but anyway, I was going to the bath every night and going to graduate school every day and then teaching English around Tokyo, as well as going to Utsunomiya every week. I would go on a Friday night and teach English that evening, and then Saturday morning teach a few more classes, and then come back to my home at Utsunomiya in Akabane. And interestingly, the sentoh experience made me understand. The first thing, us Californians, we can't believe that a woman walking out of a bath with no bra on in the middle of the, let's say, 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and there is no problem.
No, yeah, wait, no problem. That's right. But I was
For
going to say,
us, it would be a horrible problem.
but in your generation, no, not your generation, because that's when the hippies came and they were walking around with no bras. Don't forget.
Well,
in my school, what are you talking about? What are you talking about?
What I'm trying to, yeah. What I'm.
But you said with no problems. That's right.
No problem, crime-wise.
Right. They
no
didn't
problem.
do it. They did that on campuses, and in
Right.
certain areas, girls didn't have bras on. And
I
our generation
remember
started that. They took their bras off.
I remember that.
And
What I'm trying to, what I am
But-
trying to say is, I felt a sense of relaxation that I don't remember. That's all I'm trying to say.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and also
this relaxation, so I feel somewhat relaxed.
That's
where
right.
I was always concerned with,
You had to
someone's
be.
going to mug you, someone's going to, what area of town am I in?
That's right.
Is this the dangerous area? Yeah, I got to get out of here.
That's
and then, ooh, look at that guy. Those two guys are fighting over
Right,
there,
right,
and
right,
it
right.
scares you. You don't get that. This relaxation was
right.
it was a wonderful thing for. I noticed this wonderful sense of freedom is too strong a word. Anyway,
but
peacefulness.
it was. Let me ask you this,
Tranquility or something like
Ron,
that.
when was it that you really became? When did you become? When you first came here? Did you say I'm going to live here?
No.
How long did it take before you decided this is going to be home? How many years?
Well, I suppose it would be after the first decade.
Took you about 10 years before you.
Yeah.
And so how did it hit you? When did you sit back? Did you have
the
a moment?
children were, I was married. The children were young.
Well, how long had you been married? How long were you here before you got married?
I was here, I guess, 5 years, and then we got married.
Okay.
It was after graduate school. That was 3 years. Then a year in Utsunomiya. That's 4 years. 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
4 or 5 years. And the Japanese was gradually improving. And the year in Utsunomiya, that, in spite of me studying a lot of Japanese in California, and as I mentioned, I studied in California. I had my management job, that I started Japanese, and then I quit that job, and I moved to Oakland for 6 months, and then San Francisco, and I had another job. And in San Francisco, this is kind of strange, but I had a job and then they laid me off, which is kind of a painful experience, but it was wonderful because I went over to San Francisco State, walked into the language lab or the Japanese class, and just sat down. And in those days, that's exactly when President Nixon, how do I say it, accepted China, mainland China as main China, recognized China, so he's recognizing China. So there's this huge Chinese, let's say, enrollment. I mean, hundreds of people are wanting to study Chinese. Nobody wants to study Japanese. So they were begging people to come in. So I just walked in. Lance, I didn't even edit the class. I just walked in, sat down. Administration didn't know I existed. I said, do you mind if I just sit here? I'm not a student. I don't want to bother you or anything like I'm not a student. Do you mind? There's 3 people there. I said, sure, if you want to sit down and you want to get involved, sure, if you want to, go ahead and sit. The teachers didn't care. Administration, if they would have known, they would have slit my throat.
Right.
And I had my contract to come to Japan. I had my contract to come to, so I'm just study. I don't need a degree. I don't need even an audit certificate. I don't need anything. I just want the language. And they were so welcoming to me. They gave me a language lab card so I could use the language lab. They told me which textbooks, so I could go down to the bookstore and buy used Japanese textbooks. So I'm following along the lesson, and we're going through the dialogues together. And I did that for 6 months. And that was a golden thing. I went away with 4 textbooks, of which I completed 2 of them. I failed myself twice. I didn't think I was doing well, so I just said, the first one I did this first textbook I did 3 times. And then got comfortable, and then I went to the second one. And the third and the fourth I did here. I just brought my textbook. Now I know the lesson plans. I know how I want to learn, so all I need is I find a Japanese person who is maybe an English teacher, let her be my Japanese teacher, and I would dictate to her the lesson plan.
Is she who became your wife?
No.
Okay.
No, this is all in Utsunomiya. This is all in Utsunomiya. But anyway, the interesting point that I'm trying to make here, if you want it, education can be free.
Well, even more
It
so
can be
now,
free.
more so now than ever before, because the internet's made it free. It's unlimited
Yeah, I
now.
think you need good teaching and good counseling to
You
figure
need some,
out.
right, how
you
to,
got to. There's two things you've got to learn. One is you've got to be able to acquire and distribute information. So you've got to learn how to read and write, and you've got to how to speak and hear. And listening, we all forget about that, but that's important too. Once you get that ability to do that in great detail, then you can start to figure out what you want to do. But if you don't have those skills, you don't know what's out there, and you don't know what you have to offer. You're stumbling around for a lot. So anyway, I learned that, then I figure out what I want to do. And mine, as I say, it's business, and then business management, and then international business, and then after that I went into sales. And I went into sales training, and that's where I went all my travels. Most of the travels I've been was mostly sales training related.
so what company were you with when you started doing that?
I went to, getting back to my story,
Right.
I was living in Ohta-ku in Akabana, coming to Sophia University. My next door neighbor in Akabana was a top executive in Isuzu Motors. So basically he hired me. So I graduated from Sophia University, and as I say, I'm getting to know that whole community because of the sentoh, the public bath. So I always like to joke that Tokyo is not a large city. It's just thousands of villages, and they're all centered around wherever the public bath is. And that's your community. If there's a public bath over there, you're a foreigner. And you have these little communities. Well, anyway, part of my community was this guy in Isuzu Motors. He introduced me to Isuzu Motors. Then I started working for Isuzu Motors, and then shortly after that is when I got married. I knew I was going to be stable, and I guess, as I say, in the first 8-10 years within Isuzu Motors, I would say 10 years in Isuzu Motors, then I got the feeling that, in answer to your earlier question, that I really wanted to stay here.
Mm-hmm.
And stay here, it's because I can achieve more. I can achieve more here. And we always think about, people are asking you, what do you like about Japan? What do you hate about Japan? What do you like about America? What do you hate about America? And I think that's the wrong question.
Okay.
The key question is, all places have weaknesses and strengths. How can you get one country or one community or one individual helping another one who's extremely different?
Okay.
So,
Tell me, what do you think?
For me, it's the Americans. How can they work better with the Japanese? That's the important question.
Ron, tell me
Figure
this.
that out.
Tell me this, Ron. What would you think are the weaknesses and the strengths of America?
You can watch the news and get the obvious ones.
Okay.
Crime issues and such.
That's a weakness.
Crime issues is a weakness. The ability to affiliate and to, let's say, organize is a weakness in comparison to the Japanese. But the Americans' development is just wonderful. The Japanese don't have the level of interaction and idea kicking around, the creativity, the exploration, such. They don't have that kind of level, but they're extremely good in systems. So they'll run with your idea. And one of the things I learned here when I was in graduate school is the Japanese are really picking up quality ideas from around the world, and they're just systemizing them and doing them better. So they do better in manufacturing because it's system related, better in organizing, better just like the trains that go around Tokyo. The train that I came in here, I didn't know it, but I went through 3 or 4 companies. And they're all buying and selling to each other. We go on the same line, and we may go through 2 companies. And we don't know it. But they've all affiliated and worked with each other and getting lines together. And that is not I'm going to sell you something. You get development people together. It's a very, very complicated thing. So they organize extremely well in such. But you know, they're not as exciting as us Californians with our crazy ideas and such. And that's where I thought, and when I started work for Isuzu Motors, as I mentioned, for the first 5 years I was in the personnel department, very, very unhappy. I wanted to get into international international sales, international projects and such, and all they wanted me to do was teach English and do some other things. So I struggled for the first, I guess, 3 to 5 years. And then, interestingly, top management wanted to say, most of the automobile companies in Japan owned their dealership. Did you know that?
Yes,
well, most of them are owned by the dealership. So you have a dealership somewhere, but it's owned by the manufacturer. It's not Jim Smith Chevrolet, and Jim Smith's family owns the Chevrolet, and he's a franchisee. He buys from General Motors, obviously, his Chevrolet. There's not independent, they're own stores here. With that own store characteristics, they can set up training programs for their dealers, because their dealers are an internal subsidiary, right? Not an independent company. And in the United States, as you know, they'll have multi-franchise. So a guy will have a Toyota dealership, he'll have a Chevrolet dealership, he'll have a Porsche dealership, and that's what you call a mega dealer. So he's multi-franchise. So I, as a manufacturer, I don't want to train him because he's selling other brands too, not my brand. But in Japan, the retail store is owned by the manufacturer, and they sell only that brand. So they provide a lot of training for salesman training, service training, parts training, all kinds of training there. And top management within Isuzu Motors said, we want to provide that same kind of training around the world to our dealers. Armed with that, and by the way, in those days, General Motors owned 30% of Isuzu Motors.
Right.
So we're selling through an Isuzu truck, an Isuzu vehicle would sell through a General Motors channel, they would sell through their own international channel, and they would sell for, it was a joint venture with General Motors handling the developing world. And this is strictly complete vehicles sold. Others may be assembly plants, and you're assembled overseas. And you had these 3 channels. Now those channels had to have some kind of sales skills to sell the product. And when you go through this long chain of, you've got a main manufacturer, he sells to assembler, the assembler has local content in there from the local country, he sells to a dealer, within the dealer, the dealer owner doesn't sell the vehicle, the dealer owner's employee, his salesman, sells the vehicle. And that is the only guy that talks to the user. Now, how do I get this salesman over here, the retail salesman, to sell to the user? How do I get him to know the product and find the customer and find out who the competitor is? The manufacturer wanted to offer him training. So you cut through all this chain and you go right to the salesman who sells to the user. That's what I did. And that's what took me to over 60 countries worldwide.
Wow.
In Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Latin America, most of the developing country needed that kind of training. They did not know the product, so they can't sell it. They didn't know the competitor's product. They didn't know their product. They didn't know the new version to the used version, and they didn't know the customer. So that's what I had to do. That was my challenge. And they asked me, can you help us out in the training department just once a week? So I'm doing my English training job, and I had this one sales support for overseas sales over here. And then I had another overseas administration, and that's where I did copyright for magazines and rewriting speeches and doing, let's say, I'm editing or I'm going to be the support for a narration of a video. All that marketing.
Right.
I was doing all that in marketing.
Were you the
support.
only foreigner?
So I had 3 desks. In those days, yes.
How long was it before they had someone else come in?
Oh, they tried to replace me because I didn't want to do the English teaching job, and they replaced him, and that must have been 6, 7 years later.
Okay.
They had a lot of General Motors people around that are
But
working
they didn't
for
stay
General
here.
Motors.
They'd come for a while and then they'd leave.
They come from a while and leave, and of course they weren't Japanese speakers.
Right.
They had to have interpreters and stuff.
So how long did you stay with the company? 17?
21.
21 years.
Yeah.
So now you're retired.
Yeah.
And then, how long have you been retired? How long have you been retired?
Well, after I left Isuzu Motors, I worked for another company.
Okay.
And I was in sales training. Interestingly, I never sold a vehicle in Isuzu Motors. Only provided training to the dealers, and the dealers placed the order in the sales department. The sales department got the order. I'm in a training department, I get nothing. So fascinating thing is my department had no budget, but the sales department did. So my boss couldn't travel, but I could travel, because they knew if I went to a country, I gave sales training. Those salesmen are getting active, they're finding customers, and they're making sales. The sales department gets the order, they want more of that.
Right.
So it was continually going on and on and on and on. And as I say, I think I did that within the 21 years. I think it was sales training, about 16, 17 years, something like that.
So the next company was?
The company was called Unika, Unika. That's a cutting tool manufacturer.
Okay.
You know what a drill bit is. You drill a hole in concrete and you drill a hole in wood. And that. Okay, a drill bit. And there are different kind of drills. Some will go through steel and such. So I was in, it was a drill, just the bit, not the power tool, just the bit. It was a manufacturer in Tokyo, a very, very small company. And they sold a little bit in Southeast Asia and over in Korea. A guy in Korea would come over to the distributor here, buy some, and then after a certain period of time, started buying from the manufacturer.
What was your job?
My job was overseas,
okay,
not
so
training, but overseas sales. Okay. And we found the biggest markets were the United States and Europe for that product. Not Africa, so I changed. Isuzu Motors was Africa, the Middle East, Latin America. That was the developing world experience. Then I moved to Unika. This is the industrialized world. They couldn't afford, the developing world couldn't afford these products. And they wouldn't need that productivity.
So after you finished with Unika, was that the last company you worked with?
Yes.
Then you retired from there?
Yes.
What are you doing now? Let's get to where you are now. Are you?
Now I am. I'm writing articles. I'm giving speeches. I'm pretty much self-employed like you. And my biggest challenge and my biggest, say, fatigue is I'm in the, how do I say it, healthcare professional. And I have 2 daughters, as I mentioned, and my youngest daughter is married and has 2 daughters. My oldest daughter is handicapped.
Okay.
So we have to take care of her. So and that's one of the things in Japan, so I know the facility for taking care of handicapped people, because I'm involved in that community.
From birth?
Huh?
From birth she was handicapped?
From birth, yes.
Okay.
She just, could, so she always had to go to special schools and such.
That must have been very difficult, kind of difficult in Japan, do you think? Well, you would not know because you've never lived with your daughter anywhere else. No. So you cannot compare.
I don't compare. I must admit they do a good job, pretty good job with my daughter.
Yes.
And now with my wife and such, they're doing a pretty good job with her, and I'm playing a stronger and stronger role of taking care of house, domestic stuff. I'm doing more driving. I never drove. As a matter of fact, I don't know, us in California, we grew up in cars. I know you like your motorcycles?
Both. I did both.
Okay.
My father had a car.
Yeah, all right. I apologize in advance,
no.
but I have never been a car guy.
Yeah.
I've never liked to drive as a hobby. I had a motorcycle for a few years because this was in San Jose when I was a student. San Jose, just to shoot around the city for a few years. They had a motorcycle, but that was just a short period of time. But I felt being in a car was like being in a prison. And I was driving in high school, an old car that I had to fix to keep rolling. And so with the grease in your nails and all that.
That's the only thing. That's the only thing I did not like about working on my motorcycle or the car. But when I was young, it didn't matter because it was just me, and I rode with some other guys. And then your nails constantly stayed dirty, even if you cleaned, because you couldn't get it out unless you got the special type of cleaner they had, which I didn't find out about till later. Ron, before I end the podcast, there's a question I always ask everyone. This is it. If you could go back in time, knowing what you know now, and meet the younger Ron, what advice would you give him, and how old would he be?
Yeah, you asked Randall that, and I didn't know how to answer it then, and I don't know how to answer it now. I would guess I'd go back to the most traumatic area of my life.
How old were you then?
In high school.
Okay, so you could
Okay, I'm in high school, and I was not a happy guy. I was bitter about my father not being interested in me because he had his other world. And maybe the advice that I would give that guy is your family is not necessarily your biological family. So I had coaches that were really very helpful. At Sophia University here, I had teachers that are extremely helpful, and I know them now. They're well in their 80s. So you can find people who will support you, and don't be disappointed, and you won't know where that next asset will come from. And I was unhappy, and during the Vietnam War era, when I was in San Jose, before I joined the Army Reserves, it took me a good hour and a half to 2 hours to get to sleep every night. I was not into drugs or anything like that, but I was under a tremendous amount of stress. And if I could here again tell that little boy, don't worry about it, you will get through this. And in the strangest places, you're going to have someone to support you. And you won't know where it'll come from. I've had people walking down the street here in Japan, and they give me wonderful advice I never dreamed of, but I can remember their points to now. So maybe that would be the advice, to maybe reduce my earlier years' stress is probably where.
Thank you so much, Ron. That couldn't be better advice than that. That was great.
Good. I just made it up on the spot.
That's good. I want to thank all of you for watching this podcast and for listening. And remember, it's all on loan, so continue to reach for the stars.
Because you are too blessed to be stressed.